Now, introduction. Isaiah 66 books, and with the exception of a few, actually 4 chapters in the middle, it's all mostly prophecy and poetry. Interesting. And sometimes they go back and forth. But the overall genre is prophecy. The 4 chapters are a historical interlude. Okay, it's just basically a straight historical account. Chapters 1 through 35, primarily poetry about God and his relationship with his people. Chapters 36 to 39 is the historical section, which is the siege of Jerusalem by the Assyrians. Interesting. And chapters 40 through 66, generally prophecy and poetry return. And this is a more of a positive orientation than chapters 1 through 35. Okay? But that's just a general structure, general flow of the book. I want to talk a little bit about Isaiah now. He lived in Jerusalem. Isaiah was, are you ready for this? He was an elite. He was a royal. He was probably the cousin of King Uzziah, which is why, and we'll see as we go through the book of Isaiah, he had free access into the royal court. And it's very somewhat unique. Jeremiah had a similar access. This is interesting. I know actually Jeremiah had the same. I wonder, thinking about it, I don't know if any other, this would be interesting to find out. I don't know if any other prophets had the same access that Isaiah and Jeremiah had. They both had direct access, basically anytime they wanted, to the royal court, to the priesthood, to the high priests, also to the people. Interesting. But anyway, Isaiah certainly had that.
That's probably why it's so eloquently written. He was probably highly educated.
Oh, he was. He was very highly educated. The guy he was very highly educated. He was married, had at least 2 sons, gave names to them that summarized major themes of his prophecies. Shir Yashub means a remnant shall return, and Mar Shal Hashbaz means hastening to the spoil. I would love to name one of my kids hastening to the spoil.
Go get him.
Luke, we all came up. I came up. We wanted to make his middle name. I remember we're sitting on the table. I said, we need to make his middle name Danger. So we can always say, Danger is my middle name. And all the kids around the table were like, yeah! And Karen, no. So he was born in Africa, so he wanted an African name. That's why he's Luke Augusta. But Isaiah lived to be at least 90 years old, near as we could tell. So he lived a long life, probably murdered by King Manasseh when he was about 85, 90 years old-ish. And we don't know, but probably sawn in half with a saw. But that's all conjecture. He received his call to prophetic ministry during the year that King Uzziah died, which is 740, 739 BC. And he was very much glad to be drafted, if you can put it that way, assigned to this. Although, and you will see when we get to chapter 6, he was told that his ministry would basically be fruitless. Interesting, same thing with Jeremiah. And it's interesting, Isaiah prophesied during the Assyrian attacks on Israel, and they carried away the northern tribes, the 10 northern tribes in 722. And then Jeremiah prophesied during the Babylonian garbage, so interesting. Similar guys, similar times, though about 150 years apart. His wife was a prophetess. He was married. Okay. So that's the guy. So this guy was for real, and this is why, and it is, and who said, yeah, probably, and actually no probably about it, no doubt, the book of Isaiah is the best quality of writing in the Bible as far as literature is concerned. His phraseology, his ability to write and to carry an idea, illustrations, all different kinds of stuff. The guy was a brilliant writer. And also, as we'll see here, there's some hints of sermons and things like this, when he walked into people and told them what was going on. He was a very eloquent speaker as well. So, quite a man. All right, historical background and date. He was a prophet to Judah. Remember at this time, and actually I've got a little chart I'm going to hand out, a little timeline thing. He was a prophet to Judah. You remember after David and Solomon, the kingdom split to Israel, which were the 10 northern tribes, and Judah, which was Judah and Benjamin in the south. Okay? He was a prophet to Judah, to the southern kingdom, after the division of the monarchy. And it was a time of international turmoil. Assyria, when he first started out, was a big major power player, but they were not an empire yet. And they were quickly on the rise. Babylon was also, you can imagine like Assyria was just about, 10 steps ahead of Babylon during this time as far as growth and power and authority. Rome was founded during his ministry. So this is the era we're talking about. Greece is still a bunch of city-states on a bunch of islands and stuff, around. And Homer is 900 to 800 BC. Who was the philosopher that was in the 700s?
Plato
Was it Plato?
or Aristotle?
No, it wasn't Aristotle. It might have been Plato, but there was I should know this. But there was a Greek philosopher.
Socrates.
Was it Socrates? Oh, okay.
He said it.
Okay, yeah, everybody, yeah. Joe Greek guy, okay. Yeah, but I remember there was one back there. He, let's see. Yeah, Uzziah's last year is when he started. His last known prophecy, or I should say, his last recorded prophecy. He no doubt prophesied after this, but his last recorded prophecy in the book is about 700-ish. So we're talking about the content of the book of Isaiah covers a period of like 739 to 740 BC to about 700 BC. So we're talking about 40 years of content here. All right? Let's see, yeah, Assyria was on the ascension, and in 722 BC, Assyria came and conquered the 10 northern tribes and carried them off into captivity. And what happened to those 10 northern tribes?
They were scattered.
Lost forever in history. Except if you're an Anglo-Israeli. Have you heard of those guys? Have you heard of those people?
Yeah, then it's us.
No, it's not us. It is not us. But what they say is the 10 northern tribes are a bunch of white people, and they all moved to Europe, and the Europeans are the 10 lost tribes of Israel. Yeah, that's not true. That's not true, because they weren't white people. All right. Let's see, what else?
Maybe they became white.
Also, during this time, toward the end of his ministry with Babylon on the ascension, they defeat Assyria, and because of this, you got to remember, it's okay. Here, let's do this. Here's the quick and easy way, and I actually learned in seminary on how to draw the ancient Middle East. Okay, what's that? The Mediterranean. Okay. What's that? Sea of Galilee, River Jordan, Dead Sea. Okay. Well, we can actually go like this. And there's Mount Hermon. Okay. So Sea of Galilee Tyre's up here. Jerusalem's like right there. Okay, so down here is what? Egypt. Yes. Babylon is over here. Assyria is up here. Okay. So Egypt, with these guys going on, okay, and actually we could go in here. This is Greece over here. And then not the scale. Okay, these guys aren't doing anything. Rome is just getting founded. Nothing. These are still barbarians over here. There's still lions roaming Europe at this point. Assyria is on the ascension. Babylon is very, they're not far behind. But Assyria, because these guys were the most nasty, the most brutal. These guys were bad news, really bad news. Actually, when Babylon, these guys were such bad news, when Babylon was conquering, most of the conquered city-states were glad to see Babylon because the Assyrians were so nasty. But, so we got Egypt down here, and when Isaiah shows up, these guys are just on the rise, so everything's kind of free and open. And one thing, and we'll see this, and you got to remember this as we go through the book of Isaiah, the kings of Judah, okay, this is a minor player, okay, these guys, Israel can get squashed like a bug by any of these three, okay, they're a minor player, and if anybody's going to attack Egypt, they have to go right through here, okay, so it's like this. Egypt's kings are trying to figure out who to align with politically. Because if you bet on the wrong horse, the other one is gonna, jump on your head and flatten you. Okay? And we'll see here, there's all kinds of intrigue. There's all kinds of, we pay you tribute, then you're not, and then we're actually secretly, making friends with these people down here. And all of this is going on politically while Isaiah is prophesying, which is why Isaiah a lot of times is not popular with the political rulers because he's telling them to not trust in Assyria, to not trust in Babylon, to not trust in Egypt. And in fact, he's even saying, actually, Babylon's going to come in and smash, and Assyria and all this kind of stuff. So the political rulers are trying to figure out the best way they can to make Israel get on the right side and be prosperous. And then you've got this guy named Isaiah who's throwing a wrench into the whole system, and all of the people are listening to him. And the same thing happened with Jeremiah, which is why the ruling class is kind of fed up with these guys. Okay? So, during all this time, these guys with the turmoil are trying to figure out who they're going to go with, and as you might imagine, they don't always pick the right, the winning team. Okay? So, we will see that. And this was one thing, so let's say you got to keep this historical stuff in mind as we go through the book, because it's very important in understanding the book. On the very back, on the last page of your handout, are some important dates for Isaiah. You can see that there. We're not going to go through all of that. But yeah, you can, so that's there. All right, now, okay, here we go. I have a question. What do Genesis, Isaiah, and 2 Peter have in common? I don't think we're in the book. Okay. All right. What do those three books have in common?
They all have 66 chapters.
Yes. Especially 2 Peter. It doesn't even have 66 verses. Or even 66 words, maybe. Okay. What do those three books have in common?
They all, no?
They are the most attacked books by liberal scholars. Genesis because everything is connected to it, and because if you take it literally, you've got a particular God doing particular things and creation and all this kind of stuff. Isaiah, because of its predictive prophecy. And 2 Peter, just because I think it's like easy to kick around. And it's basically, what they say is that, 2 Peter and Jude are extremely similar. What was that? It's something like 60% of the content is the same, something like that. But these are the three most picked on books in all the Bible by liberal, we'll call it scholarship, higher criticism, this stuff. And what they say is, the issue with Isaiah is that they say Isaiah could not have, the man who lived during this time, could not have predicted accurately everything that's in the book. So the book had to have been written after the events by some unknown author who wrote it, who claimed it was Isaiah, and wrote it as if it had taken a place and been predicted by Isaiah. In fact, not only one author, but the fashion now is 3 different authors. Okay?
I mean, if you're just going to throw God out.
Well, that's the whole thing. It all starts with the presupposition that there is nothing supernatural, that predictive, divinely inspired prophecy cannot exist. And if that is your presupposition, then you do have to do something with the book of Isaiah. Okay?
Well, you got to throw the entire Bible out to do that.
Well, yeah, you got to throw more than Isaiah. But yeah, actually, and these ideas never even existed until the late 1700s. So, yeah. And even then it was German higher criticism is where it all started, and all of them were denying the Word of God anyway back then, so it doesn't matter. All right, a few other things. Let's see here. The theme. It's interesting. Isaiah means in Hebrew, Jehovah is salvation. And that is the theme of the book, is salvation. Yeah, like I said, it's a profound literary. I like this. One commentator said, the book of Isaiah is the gospel before the gospel. The only thing is that's not exactly true, because the gospel is in Genesis 3:15, so it was always there. But I want to explain what he meant here just a second. The reason people say stuff like that is because more than any other book of the Old Testament, Isaiah reveals more about one person than anybody else, in fact, than everybody else combined. And who is that person?
Christ.
The Messiah. Exactly. 100%.
Which is probably why Jesus quoted him so often.
Yeah, actually, the only book that's quoted more often than Isaiah is Psalms. And Isaiah really is, in a lot of ways, you could say, the high point of the Old Testament. And I don't think that's, you could put it like this, is if you could only have 2 books of the Old Testament, Genesis and Isaiah. They're that important. Let me see. Yeah, God reveals himself as the Savior. Let me see, what else? Let me see. I'm hoping to get it. I actually want to start reading. I'm actually getting excited to read it now. Yeah, it sets the stage. Excuse me. It's interesting. What it does, different books of the Old Testament are quoted differently in the New Testament for different reasons. Isaiah is quoted almost exclusively for theological reasons. You can tell that the apostles got a ton of their theology out of the book of Isaiah. Which brings us to now the messianic presentation. In the book of Isaiah, this is very interesting. Basically, it is the king who serves and suffers. Okay? Isaiah makes it clear that God's plan for his people in the world narrows in on one particular person, but the ancient rabbis, in fact, the rabbis still today, debate the nature of the Messiah from the book of Isaiah. Okay? This is primarily because of the way the Messiah is presented. Like I said, he's revealed as the king, the servant, and as the one who suffers. Now, the revelation of the Messiah as the one who suffers was not at all clearly stated before Isaiah. Okay? And this fact is what made it hard for the ancient rabbis. In fact, it was so hard, the ancient rabbis were so much trying to figure out Isaiah that, are you ready for this? And they understood this. The ancient rabbis, there were 3 opinions about the Messiah. The Messiah was one person. The Messiah was actually 2 different people. Or the Messiah was 3 people. All of this because they could not reconcile into one person the idea of king, servant, and sufferer.
When did the idea of Israel as a nation seem that?
What's that?
When did they come up with the idea of Israel itself as a nation being that person? Well, yeah, 'cause that's, I know a lot of like Jewish scholars.
Oh yeah, that's got to be a post destruction of Jerusalem idea. Although that could go back to the Babylonian captivity, but I don't think so. I wouldn't think it would go back to. And in fact, I'm gonna back up on that. I don't think it could, because Isaiah prophecies and others, because they talk about specifically the restoration of the nation to the land. I would say that's got to be a post destruction of Jerusalem, 72 AD. But back then, these people they weren't thinking about that. And the reason being is because are you ready for this? Some of the rabbis said, okay, this is 700 years BC. According to Isaiah, the Messiah must die. So therefore, there has to be another Messiah, a second Messiah, who lives and who rules. See, none of them thought that this guy would die and then rise from the dead. So it's interesting, which just shows these guys were not dumb. They were taking this seriously. They were believing all of this stuff, and then in the amount of revelation that God had given them, they were doing the best they could with what they had. It's very interesting. That's an interesting historical study in the understanding the Messiah throughout Jewish history. Very interesting. There's a lot of new and unique statements about the Messiah in the book of Isaiah. And we should read and listen to these verses from the point of view that this was new and groundbreaking information. You guys, us, if you go to church for any length of time, especially like you grow up in church, nothing here is going to be new. But Isaiah very much was like dropping nuclear bombs, like, you know, theologically and and culturally and politically. I mean, like pretty much every time he got up to speak, it was like, what? Did you hear what that guy just said? Because it was you know, blowing the boundaries off of everything.
Was he acknowledged as a prophet speaking for God?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So that's why they waited until he was basically old and decrepit. And yeah, you are grandpa's prophet. You ain't mine, so now we can kill you. Okay? All the people that were watching out for you when everybody wanted to kill you, when you were 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, they're all dead now. So now we're going to off you too. Okay. Now, you remember, in the Old Testament, the Old Testament is divided in half. Where is it divided in half?
Probably in Isaiah.
No. Nope. No, the Old Testament, not the whole Bible. The Old Testament is divided in half.
The prophets and the law?
Nope.
Must be somewhere in Job or earlier.
Genesis chapter 3. People are like, wait a minute, that's not half. Yes, it is. Yes, it is, because what happens in Genesis chapter 3?
The Messiah is prophesied.
The fall into sin and Genesis 3:15, the first proclamation of the gospel, God tells Adam and Eve, it's like Satan, okay, snake, I'll get to you in just a second. Okay. Adam and Eve, okay, here you get to suffer and you get to sweat and all this stuff. But don't worry, one of your kids is gonna come fix this problem. Now, what did Adam and Eve know about the gospel? That was the gospel. That was the first proclamation of the gospel. We know more, but that was the first. Adam and Eve now knew what?
There was a Messiah.
Somebody's coming.
Who? One of their kids is going to fix the problem, which is why, right out of the chute then in Genesis chapter 4, what does Eve say?
She thinks it's this.
Boom!
I got me a
I
man.
got one. This is the guy. Remember, God just told us 9 months ago, right? God told us that, and what do you know? Here it is. Now, she was wrong. That's why she says at the end of Genesis chapter 4 about Seth, Cain, that was Cain first. Cain, that's very wrong. Seth, though, it's like, oh, she said the exact same thing about Seth, which means what? She believed the gospel. She will be in heaven. Okay? So, the rest of the Old Testament does what then? Who remembers?
Expands that.
Establishes the
'Cause
lineage.
all we know so far is what? Who, sort of. Not really.
But
We-
it tells us watch this guy every now and then.
Well, yeah, just a second. You're jumping ahead. All we know is
One of these.
the problem's going to get fixed, and it's going to be and it's going to be a human. The rest of the Old Testament expands and tells you more about who, what, where, when, and how. We already know the why. The why is what? The why was the sin. That's why. All the rest of the Old Testament expands on that until we get to the last Old Testament prophet, who was
John the Baptist.
And what did John the Baptist get to tell everybody?
It's this guy.
Here he is. This is the guy. Okay? So, it doesn't get any more specific than that.
Did the Jews expect the Messiah to be a man?
Yes,
So they
absolutely,
knew,
100%.
so they knew it was going to be a human.
Yeah, because Abraham got told that. One of your kids, David, got told that. Absolutely, they were looking for a genuine human being. Okay, now, and I always got to bring this up, whenever I bring up the subject, I always have to bring up Leviticus, because Leviticus is also a key point on this progress of redemption, understanding redemption. In Leviticus, we learn what about the who, what, where, when, how, and not the why. Remember, the why is the sin. But out of the who, what, where, when, how, what do we learn in Leviticus?
Blood.
The how.
The sacrifice. The blood.
Somebody's gotta die for this to be fixed.
Because animal blood was not enough.
Yep. Blood of bulls and goats does not take away sin. Now, so when we get to Isaiah, okay, you guys, look at this. The nation of Israel, they know all of this, at least up to Isaiah. Okay? So Isaiah shows up and he says, hey, listen to me. You know the one that God promised to Adam and Eve, and then he also then promised to Father Abraham? I'm going to tell you way more about him. And that's what Isaiah does. And in fact, again, so much so, remember that these ancient rabbis, they hear this and they go, what? What? How can the one who fixed the problem, like, be a servant because he's a king? But then how does he die? How does all this work? So that's what's going on in the book of Isaiah. So it's like this. It's kind of hard to, if like I said, if you've gone to church at all for any length of time, it's like, well, yeah, of course, like I know all this. Yeah, but this was mind-blowing to these people. And then add into that a time in history, kind of sounds familiar, where there is culturally, worldwide, politically, socially turmoil. Things going on. A lot going on. All right, let me see, what else? Okay, there we go. I'm going to finish there. That's good enough for the introduction. Google it if you want to know more. Although I will say this, don't Google the liberal people because it's not even worth reading.
How do you know who's who?
You guys, so any questions on that so far? No? Everybody get it?
Were they expecting the two messiahs thing because they're looking at and thinking, okay, the Messiah is going to conquer and win everything,
Yes.
but how can he when he's a man of sorrow and afflictions?
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly. Right.
conquer
I mean, it makes
afflictions,
sense. It's like, how does this work? It makes sense. Which, by the way, you guys have to say this. This gives a little bit of insight into why. Remember, Jesus walking around for 3.5 years, speaking as no man ever spoke, healing people. Basically, he's a traveling show, hospital, and restaurant. Okay, because he spoke as no one ever spoke. He healed everybody and fed everybody. So he's walking around, and what's one of the big questions that continually through his ministry is what?
who are you?
Is this the guy? Because remember, that was a major theological discussion among the rabbis. So if your religious teachers are wondering and discussing about what the nature of the Messiah is, it's not a surprise that when he shows up, the people who have been taught by these people who are trying to figure it out are also going like, is this the guy? I don't know, but is he? I don't know.
A lot of it was that he didn't come back as a king
Right.
to rule. And
Right.
so they're like, is this the guy? How can it be this guy?
So, okay. Here we go. Luke, please. You got more here? Here's a timeline.
So they expected the Messiah to be born of royal birth.
And yes, I got you. All right. So if you look at this, start at the top, obviously. The creation, the fall, somewhere back there. And then Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the orange. And then you slide over to the left, you follow the red arrow. Slide over to the left, the slavery, and these are approximate. This is a conservative understanding of history, but the dates are approximate.
Luke.
Joseph. Sorry. Here you go.
That's right. She wants to take one home.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Joseph in slavery, and Joseph and Moses, slavery in Egypt, and then over the conquest in Canaan. Joshua, Judges. David becomes king, Solomon becomes king, and then the kingdom splits. To the left is the southern kingdom, that's Judah and that's the red one. That's Judah and Benjamin. To the right is the northern kingdom. Those are the 10 northern tribes, Israel. Go on down. And then you see that gray box right in the middle. This is the time of Isaiah's prophesying. Although they extended down to 681 BC, I think that's a little too long. It probably ends around 700. But, so Isaiah time of writing, and you can see as he's writing, the Assyrian Empire is on the ascension. The northern tribe, the yellow box, comes to an end in 722 BC. The red box continues on until 587, and the Babylonian captivity, when the occupants of Jerusalem are hauled off to Babylon. You can see that on the right, Babylonian Empire, and then the Persians take over, and then the return to the land under Zerubbabel, and then also under Ezra and Nehemiah. The Persians take over, and then in 331 BC, Alexander the Great wipes out Persia, and then on down to about 6 to 3 BC, Jesus is born, and there you go. That's the flow. That's generally what's happening. Okay? What's happening now? And it's it's the thing. You don't know the players without a program. The historical situation of Isaiah, and that's why spending time on this is very important to understanding what he's talking about in the book. Okay? Because he throws out all these names and stuff, and talking about this guy coming and attacking over here, and this and this and this. It's like this. You gotta, as we go through Isaiah, you need to keep the political situation in mind, because Isaiah is commenting a lot on it. Okay, and he's got a lot to say about it. All right. Okay. Wow. Any questions so far? Is this interesting?
Yes.
Okay. I hope it's useful. Get out your outline here. I like the major three-part outline. There's also a two-part outline, which basically goes 1 to 40, 40 to 66. But this one is a much. For the last 3 weeks, I've spent a lot of time on this. Book of the King, chapters 1 through 39. Prophecies to the people in the land before exile during Isaiah's lifetime. See, this gives you an idea. Okay, so, Isaiah is over here, and this is going on. Think of it this way. While Isaiah is alive, okay, chapters 1 through 39 are prophecies about what's going on at the time. Okay? Then, Book of the Servants, Part 2, chapters 40 through 53, prophecies to the captives in the world. This would be, Babylonian, but also Assyrian. Okay? Though not specifically, but prophecies to the captives of the world in exile in the future after Isaiah's time. Okay? This is important to understand. You guys, a lot of people get confused in the book of Isaiah because they don't realize that these chapters, this group of prophecies, Isaiah is not referring to a time that's going on in his time. He's referring to a time that's after his time. Okay? And then, Book of the Conqueror, chapters 54 to 66, prophecies to the restored community after exile in the distant future after Isaiah's time. So look at here, we've got before exile, while Isaiah is alive, in exile, not too long after Isaiah had passed away, and after exile, a long time after Isaiah passed away. Okay? All right. Any questions on that? Did I explain that well enough? You got that? Okay. All right, and then you can see broken down into the major sections there, ongoing, and that's pretty much how we're going to follow through the book like this, just like the outline. Okay. Isaiah. Any questions? Any questions? Oh, come on, I thought
How did he get sawed in half?
with a saw and a couple of guys.
Why? Why?
Because prophets are unpopular.
Oh,
Nobody loves a man who tells them the truth. They respect him, but they don't love him. And it's still that way today. And especially, remember, you throw in the political stuff, and you're on the wrong side of the political discussion a lot of times, okay? Welcome to the history of the world, and, you know, God, according to the world, is on the wrong side of politics a lot. Okay, I mean, he's not, but, you know, from the world's perspective. And then you stand up and you're saying, yeah, well, you know, God says you're a bunch of idiots. Okay, like, well, we think you ought to die. Okay, I mean, that's, you know, no, really. These guys were not popular. And especially when you add in the personal element, this guy knew everybody. He was related to all the people in charge, so he could, you know, it's like, you know, gee whiz, Ahaz, you've been an idiot since the 3rd grade, and now you're just doing more of it, you know? I mean, you know, no, listen, okay, how many of you like it when your family tells you you're wrong? Right? Because no, I remember you've been the biggest moron in the family and everybody knows it forever. You know, I mean, no, really, okay. Yeah, so this is you guys, this is why historical context and situation, all of this matters. Because when you know this, when you understand it, now you read the book, it helps to understand what it, and of course, yes, this is happening. Oh yeah, of course, Babylon, they were, you know, rising up, and of course, you know, Israel wanting to throw off tribute and the yoke of the Assyrians, being the nasty people they were, of course they were making secret deals with Babylon and Egypt to get rid of these guys. But then what's the danger in doing that? What if Assyria finds out you've been doing that? What's Assyria going to do? Squash you. Lo and behold, what do you think happened? Okay. All right. These guys were supposed to be paying tribute and, you know, walking in step with the Assyrians. Assyria found out they weren't, so what did Assyria do?
I mean, it took him.
Yep. So, you guys, all right, this is one. Yeah. The Bible is not just a bunch of stuff, okay? All of this happens in real life, and nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. All righty. Actually left out, I had a half a page rant on all that stuff. Okay. So here we go. Let's jump in. Maybe we can get through the first 9 verses. I know that in your Judgment on Judah, Wrath and Grace, chapter 1, verse 1 through 31, there's actually 3 subsections here. I don't know. If I'm feeling particularly nice, maybe I'll give you the full outline next week. I don't know. We'll see. But Judgment on Judah. All right. Are you guys ready? Can you stand it? Yes. Here we go. You ready? The book of Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 1, verse 1. The vision of Isaiah, the son of Amoz, which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. Hear, O heavens, and give ear, O earth, for the Lord has spoken. Children have I reared and brought up, but they have rebelled against me. The ox knows its owner, and the donkey its master's crib, but Israel does not know. My people do not understand. Ah, sinful nation, a people laden with iniquity, offspring of evildoers, children who deal corruptly. They have forsaken the Lord. They have despised the Holy One of Israel. They are utterly estranged. Why will you still be struck down? Why will you continue to rebel? The whole head is sick, the whole heart faint. I just have to stop right there. This is because this guy's such good. Think of a nation. Think of Israel. What would the head be?
The king.
Politics. What would the heart be? The priests, the religious. And you guys, those guys are they weren't stupid. The king and the chief priest reading, 5 verses into Isaiah go, what? Are we going to put up with this garbage? The whole head is sick, and the whole heart faints. From the sole of the foot even to the head, there is no soundness in it, but bruises and sores and raw wounds. They are not pressed out or bound up or softened with oil. So, from the sole of the foot to the head, who then also does he include? He's got, so far, we've got politics, we got religion, and we got
The people.
everybody else. Now, you see why he would be very unpopular? It's like, yes, for my first sermon, I want to make sure you all know, okay, that you are laden with iniquity, offsprings of evildoers, and children who deal corruptly. That's the theme of my first sermon. Let's go back to that church. Verse 7. Your country lies desolate, your cities are burned with fire. In your very presence, foreigners devour your land. It is desolate, as overthrown by foreigners, and the daughter of Zion is left like a booth in a vineyard, like a lodge in a cucumber field, like a besieged city. If the Lord of hosts had not left us a few survivors, we should have been like Sodom and become like Gomorrah. That, I kid you not, is one of the greatest introductions that has ever existed in literature. That is phenomenal.
Oh, and church potluck
I should
this Sunday.
rework that for this coming Sunday.
I was amazed by your cucumber.
Yeah.
We had a little cucumber patch.
But also, I just want to say this. Did you notice, even though it's a translation, there is a cadence, there is a flow, there is clear illustrations, everything works. And if you notice, each statement ends up in a resolution so you know exactly what he's talking about. Honestly, you guys, he's a much better, Paul, he starts talking and doesn't know when to shut up. He's like, oh yeah, now I want to, and off he goes, and he leaves a lot of empty and loose threads all over the place. Okay? Luke does not this Luke, but Dr. Luke wrote, you read Acts and Luke, he also does a really good job of finishing his ideas and tidying up his sentences and stuff. But yeah, you can tell. Paul was a very emotional, passionate kind of guy. Isaiah, man, you would not want to debate this guy. He would shred you. Okay, next section, 10 through 20, and this will finish. We got just about 5 minutes. So he says, okay, that's his introduction. It's like, king, political people, religious people, all people, listen up, you losers. Hear the word of the Lord, you rulers of Sodom. Okay, he's not really talking to Sodom, he's calling Judah Sodom. Okay. Give ear to the teaching of your God, you people of Gomorrah. This is just like, listen up, you bunch of Chi-Com losers, Zimbabweans, Colombians, whatever,
Taliban terrorists.
Yeah, there we go. Who are we bombing this week? Right. Yeah. Verse 11. What to me is the multitude of your sacrifices, says the Lord. I have had enough of burnt offerings of ram and the fat of well-fed beasts. I do not delight in the blood of bulls or of lambs or of goats. When you come to appear before me, who has required of you this trampling of my courts? I mean, how can you, I mean, yeah, okay,
That's a direct at the high priest.
exactly, but I mean, how can you not, like, read this and just smile? I mean, okay, yes, it's bad news, okay, I'm not saying, but man. Bring no more vain offerings. Incense is an abomination to me. New moon and Sabbath are the calling of convocations. I cannot endure iniquity and solemn assembly. Your new moons and your appointed feasts my soul hates. They have become a burden to me. I am weary of bearing them. When you spread out your hands, I will hide my eyes from you. Even though you make many prayers, I will not listen. Your hands are full of blood. Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean. Remove the evil of your deeds from before my eyes. Cease to do evil. Learn to do good. Seek justice. Correct oppression. Bring justice to the fatherless. Plead the widow's case. Come now. Let us reason together, says the Lord. Though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Do you see what he's doing? What is good about country and people up to this point?
No, nothing.
Nothing. But yet, what is he saying?
There's hope.
In spite of them, there's hope. Though they are red like crimson, they shall become like wool. If you are willing and obedient, you shall eat the good of the land. But if you refuse and rebel, you shall be eaten by the sword. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken. Wow. Wow. You guys, also, one of the reasons I want to include this, because it was a world in turmoil, and because of all the stuff going on, there's another thing I want you to do. It's like, yeah, try and remember, like, try, as much as you can, time warp back to, 730 BC, okay, and becoming, an ancient Israelite. But also, don't forget who you are in this world. And there is a ton of stuff that Isaiah is saying just about life, including politics and religion, that every bit of it is 100% applicable to us as well. Because we're not ancient Israel, but we are God's people. In a same kind of world. All right.
So Steve,
Yes.
in 14, it says, my soul hates, and this is God talking.
Yes.
God's soul.
Yes.
That's a concept.
As deep as it gets. Yeah, well, this is one of the reasons why Isaiah is amazing. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He's not
So,
pleased.
yeah, and you get an idea, and it's true. Right off the bat, although he's, Isaiah turns his guns on, everybody, you get an idea that, whoa, this is like you get a how do I put it? I guess I'll say this, yeah, a grand idea of God, even here. All right, let's